Sesaat lagi Anda akan menyaksikan Asia Forward in association with
Minister, this is very interesting. Do you have any proof or information about Indonesian election, how PRC is going to affect or influence the Indonesian presidential election?
This is a very good question. In fact, a lot of institutions have already done very good research. For example, the Freedom House has tried to document how the PRC is infiltrating into other democracies and try to shape narratives or public opinion in other countries. And among the Southeast Asian countries, the Freedom House found that Indonesia is the third country to be influenced by the PRC on its public opinion. So this is something that we need to be aware of. And we hope that there can be more alternative resources of news items so that the Indonesian friends can have broader views of the international community rather than just accepting or for some news outlets to accept only the Chinese narratives. And this is not only Taiwan or Indonesia. We also have some very prominent NGOs like Doublethink Lab. They've also conducted cross-country comparison. For example, countries like Malaysia or New Zealand or Canada. The Chinese government also went through some Chinese publications to influence their public opinion among the native Chinese. So this is something that authoritarianism is trying to do. And we simply have to be clear-eyed on these kinds of influence.
Minister, you just mentioned that China has been ramping up its diplomatic pressure, and not just diplomatic pressure, also the tariff issue that you just mentioned before, and economic pressure on Taiwan in recent years. How is Taiwan responding to this pressure, and what are the implications for regional stability?
Economic pressure is something that not only Taiwan is experiencing. Look at Australia. Just a few years ago, when the former Prime Minister Scott Morrison mentioned that the world should investigate the origin of COVID, the Chinese just applied heavy sanction, economic sanction against Australia, banned Australian seafood and also timber, coal, and wine. And that was a heavy penalty against also Australia. And when the Lithuanians allowed the Taiwanese government to open up a representative office a couple of years ago, the Chinese also sanctioned against Lithuania. And the Chinese government has also done the same to Canada and many other countries. And all these lead many countries to think about anti-economic coercion instruments. The EU has recently concluded their anti-coercion instrument, which is going to be very important for the European countries to deal with the economic coercion raised by the PRC. In the recent G7 summit in Hiroshima back in May, they also discussed the anti-economic coercion measure. And I think it's become an international consensus that democracies around the world need to be aware of the potential of running into economic coercion. And I think the countries that I just mentioned, EU or G7 or other groups, need to think about how to work with each other to deal with the economic coercion. And of course, it's more unfortunate for Taiwan that we don't have that many diplomatic relations with those countries. And therefore, we simply have to diversify or de-risk in our economic relations with the PRC. In previous years, Taiwan's export or Taiwan's outbound investment to other countries, almost 80% went to China. And that's too much. But in recent years, the businessmen understand that maybe the PRC or China is no longer that profitable and they need to diversify their investment. They're going to Southeast Asia, they're going to India, they're going to Mexico, and etc. And now our outbound investment, only 30% goes to the PRC. So this is a significant reduce of Taiwan's investment in China. And with that, there's a lot less risk associated with Taiwan's investment in the PRC. And by the same token, when we speak about the diversification or de-risking, we follow the international supply chain. So when the Google or Apple, they say that we need to move out of the PRC in our supply chain. We need to go to India, we need to go to Southeast Asia. The companies working with those main supply chain will move out as well. So Foxconn, one company that had millions of employees in China, now they are building factories larger than their production in the PRC. So this is a way of de-risking. So if we are able to de-risk in our business associations with China, then we will be less susceptible to the PRC weaponization of trade or economic activities. So this is a way to do it. And now when other countries are talking about de-risking their relations with the PRC, at the time when they are discussing the anti-economic coercion, I think they are looking at Taiwan as a good example. You know, when we make investment to the PRC, it has to go through a very tight screening process to make sure that our investment going to the PRC is not going to create national security problem for Taiwan. So this is an experience that many countries have already been learning. And we hope that through this kind of very serious way of reviewing the investment or trade with the PRC, we should be able to reduce our risk. And in the recent PRC announced lifting of the tariff zero on Taiwan, I think the impact is going to be relatively small. It's going to be limited to some sectors of petrochemical. So I hope that the international community can all look at de-risking to safeguard their economic relations with the PRC.
Foxconn is moving out from China. What about the Taiwanese company like TSMC? We got some information that TSMC also moved out from a part of their supply chains, moved out from Taiwan and moved to the other countries. What do you think of that?
Well, I think Taiwan's companies making investment in China, they are facing some dilemmas. The first dilemma is that they might not be able to freely move their assets out of the PRC because there's a very tight control. So what they do is to reinvest in the PRC with the profit they gain. And they try to move their investment out of the PRC whenever possible. And when the United States and the PRC engaged in the trade war with each other, and subsequently there was a COVID situation hit the PRC very hard, Taiwanese companies started to think about moving out. So gradually they find one way or another move out of the PRC. And the number one destination, of course, is coming back to Taiwan. So a lot of Taiwanese businessmen, they invest in Taiwan and they don't invest in the PRC anymore. So that allowed the Taiwanese economy to grow in a very healthy way when the world suffered from recession or suffered from a general economic slowdown because of the COVID. And this is something that our businessmen are rather smart in doing. Other than coming back to Taiwan, they also look at Southeast Asia as their potential destination. Excuse me. They also look at Southeast Asia as their potential destination. Many of them go to Vietnam, some go to the Philippines and Malaysia, and some also want to go to Indonesia. And after all, Indonesia is a big country. And some businessmen also look at India as a very good destination, like Foxconn, I said a little bit earlier. Some even want to move as far away as Mexico. So this is a Taiwanese way of diversifying their risk. And so far, I think our trade or economic relations or the exposure to the risk has reduced significantly because of the diversification efforts by our business people.
In association with